Hi. On today's episode, I spoke with the amazing Brooke Shields. From her first modeling gig at 11 months old, starring roles in Hollywood films as a tween, her own sitcom, and Broadway shows, Brooke has really lived her whole life in the public eye. She's also used her platform to change the conversation around postpartum depression and aging. I really loved talking to her. I hope you find something in our chat to connect to, and thanks for joining us on Reclaiming. Hi, Brooke.
Hi, Monica.
First, I just want to say, I think you're an extraordinary person, an extraordinary woman, and a human being. And just like I've known about you, most of my life, but I think doing this deeper dive to get to talk to you, I don't know, not to sound cheesy, I just honor so much of what you've been through.
Thank you. Well, I loved our talk on when I had my time to be with you for the
Now
show.
What?
Yeah.
Your podcast, Now What?
Yes, which is no longer, but it was.
Okay.
I got to. I loved our chat, and I've loved every time I've run into you, and we have some of really good mutual friends. So it's always nice.
Yeah.
And I think you're lovely, and I think you're also
thanks.
extraordinary. So.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, of course, I was very aware. I'm only a few years younger than you, and so I became aware of you as a kid, and feel like as soon as I've known about anything in the world, I've known about you. And then even I had this poster of you on my wall in my bedroom. And I think it was an anti-smoking
Did it have
campaign.
cigarettes out of the ears?
Yes. And my dad is a radiation oncologist. So and he gave it to me, which made sense when I kind of put everything together of, why did I have a poster?
Well, it was this whole campaign of smoking spoils your looks. And I did all these commercials where, if someone's been smoking and, you come home and your hair smells like smoke.
Right.
And it was it was an anti-smoking campaign. Then they were pulled. It's funny that my voice sounds like this because I went to go see a show last night and there was all this haze.
No.
And I've literally, my voice is squeaking because of it. I have asthma. So, but anyway, I was brought to D.C. to testify in front of Congress because of my smoking ads. And they pulled all of them. The tobacco lobbyists were so powerful. They pulled all of them and said, because of my early movies, I was an inappropriate role model based on my acting roles. And therefore, they pulled the commercials and they pulled the poster and they nixed the whole thing.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Isn't that amazing?
Insane.
It's amazing.
It is. But also, too, I feel like that would never happen to a man.
No. And I don't, but it would happen today. I think it would still happen today. There would be some moral high ground that they would be able to do, and they're so powerful, and the tobacco industry is so powerful, and
lobbying, sure.
It was so interesting to me because I was only 15, maybe 14 or 15, and it was the panel. Not one woman was on the panel, and I was with my mom, and I was so attacked. My character was attacked. And I thought, God, I'm an actress. If I played a murderer, would you have said I was not, the appropriate person to say don't smoke? But because I had played a prostitute and because of Endless Love and Blue Lagoon and the sort of sexual nature, they went down that path, and obliterated me. It was so interesting.
Oh, honey.
It was just interesting.
Sorry. It's, yes, I know the whole, when you go through, I didn't have to testify before Congress. They let me do it in the presidential suite at a hotel.
That is so kind.
Instead, it was so kind.
There's
a whole table of men
message there. There's no message there. There was no thought put behind that.
No, not at all.
I don't like saying things are about male, female. Like, I don't always want to resort to that. It's like when I wrote my most recent book, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't from an anger standpoint. It's not a burning of the bra, and it's not it's not an activist in that way, but there are actual differences, and you see them. Which is why I think I was also so shocked when women who were in power pulled similar things on me because they're predominantly in the male world.
Yeah, what's the most memorable one of those instances?
I think Barbara Walters basically asking me on live television what my measurements were and then making me stand up next to her so that we could compare. I was 16 maybe, or 15, 16, and she was in her late 30s, I think. And she was comparing her shape to mine on TV. And I remember standing up and you could see my face like, this doesn't feel right, but she's a mom. Like, she should know this stuff.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
It is. I think, I don't know if we're there yet in history, but I think we'll get there at some point of looking at the trajectory of the women anchors who broke the ceiling, right? They still had to they had to present very feminine, but they had to still play by a lot of the men's rules. And
I talked to Katie Couric about this very thing.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Because she had that whole, there were rules, and those same rules sort of didn't apply. Like, nobody was telling the men what to wear, but I guess, they have a suit and that's it. But there was also but you had to wear makeup and you had to do your hair and you still had to be appealing as a woman, which that kind of interesting double standard was interesting to talk to her about.
Yeah. The same thing happens to women who are in the public eye in a court situation, right? I remember when Martha Stewart was testifying and was being prosecuted, and it's like, well, what did she wear? And her Hermes bag and her, those things, or thinking about what I had to wear.
That's why it was so genius that she wore the cape.
Oh, I don't remember that part.
Remember the cape that was made for her in prison? And then she marketed it and she sold it.
Oh my God. Oh, that's amazing.
I don't know if it was made by someone in prison or if it was made for her. But I think it was made, and she wore it to court, and then she came out with a line of them of some kind. It was kind of genius, but that's what I remember. I may be wrong, but that's what I remember.
Well, I hope that's what it was, and if not, you should rewrite her history, because that's a pretty
it's a good story.
Ballsy. It's a baller. I don't know if you feel this way, but from the outside, it looks like the world has been trying to tell you who you are, or did for a long time, of, you're America's sweetheart, you're the Calvin Klein model, you're the most beautiful baby, a girl who somehow wasn't allowed to age and or have opinions or be a fully formed human. And I guess, I felt, and maybe I'm projecting in some ways, because I think I felt like I've had my narrative taken from me at times and told by the world who I was supposed to be. That was part of why I wanted to talk to you, for Reclaiming. So also, welcome to the show. Sorry, I forgot that part.
Thank you.
Still learning all the things. But you're entering a new decade soon, and you have this new book out. Brooke Shields is Not Allowed to Get Old. That title says so much.
I couldn't believe they went for it. We were like, they're not going to go for it. I'm not going to go for it. And then they were like, wait a minute. I said, it's got to have an edge to it, because and I think why it's resonating is that it is my story. Everything I say is just coming from my own experience, but there is a collective experience that women are feeling, and they feel pressured to never get old, to not celebrate their years or their, I'm not saying celebrate your wrinkles or celebrate the fact that your, knees are saggy or you could tie a knot in them. But it's not, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying we are under pressure in a very different way from the male gaze, from from the news, from marketers, from, there's so much. And, if you are Princess Diana or, or Marilyn Monroe or, some of these people that we've really gotten so attached to, if they die young, they stay young. That is who they are. We never saw her old. We never saw. And there's something that people get very attached to. And, it could have been about a poster of me or Blue Lagoon or the Calvin Kleins are the first jeans their parents let them wear or, and there's something that if I change and I grow, what does that mean about them? It sort of turns the mirror around and it's uncomfortable for people. And I was at a party and I was talking to this man and he was being very lovely and, paying attention and was interested. And he was, he was kind of doing the guy thing, kind of.
Yeah.
And I
touching you.
And I mentioned my age and we were talking about wine. And I said, I wonder, because I was writing this book, I thought, I wonder if a 1965 bottle of something red, does it turn to jam? That was funny to me. I thought, that'd be a good chapter. Like, am I in my jam phase? Just to sort of take everything. Women, get better with age, just like wine. And then you're like, yeah, but there's another message that you were getting. So he changed his tone immediately when he heard my age. And he knee-jerk reaction said, I really wish you didn't tell me that. You didn't need to tell me that. And I was so taken aback because I said, why? Does that make you older? And he said, well, yeah, but, and I thought, oh, wow, you can't flirt with a 58-year-old.
Wow.
You can flirt with maybe a 20, 30-year-old, but that's kind of where the line gets drawn. Once you're 40, you're not flirtable anymore. Or, and there was something, what if he was caught, he didn't do anything, but I'm saying like if that wasn't a cool concept for him to sort of be seen in that light with someone who was almost 60. That's like a grandmother.
Right. I mean, you have a great quote actually from your book where you're talking about this and the stigma of invisibility and stuff. And you say, maybe the point is to confuse and surprise everyone about who we are. And I just love that. Yeah. And I think that's pretty much, you just exemplified that in both the thinking about with the wine and what you're saying to the guy.
But I think that's, we're very capable of pivoting. As women, we're capable of multitasking. We're capable of, and I don't go all the time and say it's about procreation or whatever, but there's a reason why if you are capable of bringing a child right into the world, right, and you house them and you and all that like stuff that you have to go through, you got to really want them, because it's not an easy thing. But just by virtue of that, we're quite formidable. And we also have to be able to think about that and this and that and recognize that and have eyes behind your head here and notice, that person, I know where they're coming from. And you have to be at the ready. But there's something sort of fabulously formidable about that to me. And I like the idea that you talk about reclaiming and, your narrative. You have this in a million times, is you tap into your intelligence, and you've done that. I've seen you do that
Thank you.
For decades. But that's a real strong point for women that we're not really taught. We're taught sort of look a certain way, but just keep your mouth shut and just, and I know that's an old concept, but it still is today. And, I go into these venture capital meetings and, trying to get people's money, basically fundraising. And, if it's a man, I'm immediately put in my place and told what I don't know and being told sort of from another place. When I go into women's meetings, they don't say it like that. They say, have you tried this? Because this worked for us when we were starting this business. And it's so interesting to me that because I don't ever want to fully adapt. I don't think you have to act like a man to be in a male-dominated whatever. I don't think so.
But it's interesting because you were mentioning some of the evolutionary stuff. And it's funny because when I was talking to the producers yesterday and we were, chatting about like what we're all excited to hear from you in different ways. And we ended up in this conversation talking about, fucking Darwin. And I'm like, this
Darwin
feeling
knew kind of what he was talking about. Like,
exactly,
the trees go to the sun and the ones that are, there's an adaptability.
Right. Adaptability, and also there's sort of the
survival of the fittest.
Exactly. But it can feel, I think, sometimes as a woman, like who's aging, that we're almost trying to swim against natural selection in that way because we haven't found the place for wisdom with women yet, in a way. Like, to me, the beauty that comes from wisdom and appreciating that. I don't know if this is all making sense, but
no, it is so interesting because that wisdom has to be earned, and you learn how to know your audience. I recently went to DC again to not to testify, but to lobby, which is, I am not that person, but it was for equity, actors' equity. And it was for arts funding. And the first time I went in and I went through all the touchy-feely aspects of why the arts are important. And during the times of, distress, we turn to the arts and all of this. And it was like, it was on deaf ears. Like, it was just, you could see people's eyes glazing over. And I thought, oh my God, I'm doing the very thing. I'm trying to do slapstick in a Shakespeare theater. Like, what was I mean, Shakespeare also had a lot of humor, but he's dead, so he's not going to get mad at me. But I was like, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? And I realized that it wasn't until I started talking about economics and the economic value to the arts that they perked up. And I thought, Brooke, take your own advice. Like, know your audience, talk to them about the things that are going to register with them. And I think that's taken wisdom and growing older for me, because it used to only be about being liked. I just wanted to be approved of and liked. And then I got my star and I got my pat on the back and I was considered nice. And that meant whatever it meant. There was currency in that. And now the currency of someone who's almost 60 is, it's not about wanting to be liked. It's just about finding ways to be heard and listened to and have your thoughts and beliefs, whether the other person disagrees, is fine. But you've put yourself on record for yourself, and I think that is when you're talking about Darwin. Like, I'm going to drop a name, but Gloria Steinem, right? I'm a huge fan of her as a person, and I've met her many times. And she said, every important movement started in a basement, in a kitchen, at a little table in a corner of and now you look back and you see the progress in hindsight. And I think we're in a very interesting place as females now. And because we are past childbearing age, technically, I mean, I don't even think I have any eggs left, but you need a chisel to make them crack. But that value, and it's nothing to do with whether you want kids or don't want kids or whatever happened. I mean, it was the only thing I knew for sure growing up. But when that value dissipates, the even more focal point comes to beauty and comes to youth. And, now I have two girls, who are 19 and soon to be 22. And they're at the beginning of their rosiness and fullness. And you're just like, oh, wow, I did not appreciate that when I had it.
Same.
Oh, no, you glow. You're so beautiful.
Oh, thanks. I mean, you too. But I think it's been interesting for me because I think sometimes I hear people say more complimentary things about my physical appearance now than they did in 1998 for certain. And some of that I think can come from, it's fascinating to me with a background in psychology. Like it's
You had to have a background in psychology.
Yeah, exactly.
You
But it's interesting to sort of think about how much of what we see and perceive is impacted by what we're hearing and reading and our feelings about someone. So when people, like, this is still my face. It's the same face I was born with, the same face I had at 22 and 24 and 30, I mean, it has Botox and filler in it, but like I try to go natural with it, or natural looking, I should say.
But like, let's stop there for just 1 second, because I don't currently have anything in my face, but I'm going to start a show. And I'm going to go and I'm going to be like, okay, what can you do? Can you peel this? But I still need expression. Right. Can you take the big deep breath? Like, it's there. So there shouldn't be any shame in it. But then if you don't do anything, there's shame. If you do too much, there's shame. How are people to know it's the only way to even be able to walk through your life is to just do it the fuck you want to do? Like, I went to an opening of a musical last night. There was a big spectacle.
Oh, what'd you see?
I saw Stranger Things. But after I finished the red carpet, I know all the ushers because I've been on stage so much, and they're the same ushers. They go to different theaters sometimes. And so I've been in the trenches with these people, and I recognize them and I say hi. And then, like, they brought me in front of the line of some other people. And I know them. Like, I asked one about his daughter and the other one, and I was like, I was like, oh, you switched theaters. And they were so happy to say hi to someone that they recognized from working with them. And a guy in line got very disgruntled that some woman was being put in front of him. And he looked and he went, no, it's just a housewife. A real housewife. They thought I was a real housewife. And I was like, is that a compliment? I don't know if it is. Like, I mean, they present pretty well. Like, they all do a lot of, like, they put it together and I didn't hear it. My assistant heard it, and she said, I wheeled around on them, and I said, she is not a real housewife. But like the connotation of that like, there's so much in that statement. I don't even know how to unpack it because I didn't spend any time on it until just a second. But there is that, they're so quick to assess your size, not yours, but a woman's size, a woman's wrinkles, a woman's this. It just gets so attacked. And from the time I was a little girl, I was told, you don't do runway. You're the face. Because your body, I didn't fit into any of the runway clothes. Because I was never small.
Wow.
I was like, my hands are big. Like, I've got, they look really big there in the front of the camera. But they, that was the narrative that I grew up with, is she's too big for runway, or she's the athletic one, which in modeling meant you weren't skinny. She's the big girl. And then it became like, oh, she's big boned. And, you walk around, I was 6 foot at the time, and you think, God, I must be a giant. Like, I must be horrible, because it's being barked at you, either to you or about you, So it's just so interesting that what women do have to contend with. And how do you not fall prey to it? How do you find your balance in what you're okay with? That has to be it, because you can't do any of it or not do any of it for other people.
Right. And I think back to that, what you've talked about is sort of that sense of aging on our own terms. And that, that there is there is the biology, there is the natural selection thing that is still always there, even in how we see people and assess people. It's like, right, our reptilian brain of, is this person safe or are they not safe, right? I wanted to pivot a little, and I'm kind of obsessed with your documentary, Pretty Baby. So... as opposed to the Louis Malle film from 78. And so this, this came out, I think, was it a year or two ago? I know it's on Hulu now. And
I think it was 2 years ago now. Wow.
Seeing it reminded me, my memories of you are just rosy because you were sort of this golden girl, right, for me growing up. But you were sexualized so much. And of course, the documentary talks about that.
Yeah.
What was it like for you to sort of film the documentary, to be looking back in all those ways, which I'm sure you look back all the time, but to do it in such a pointed way?
I don't look back. I mean, I think that I never watched any movies I was in. There was this like, nope, it's my work and that's it. And I'm going to shut it down. I'm going to have a normal life. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to have friends. Like I was so compartmentalized. And my mom also did keep a lot of the negative publicity from me, but she also didn't show me the good stuff. Like, she's like, we're just going to not think about what their opinion is. We're just going to you're going to keep working. And if we do this movie, we get a car. If we do that movie, we get to be in a bigger apartment. Or, it was very transactional and we were a team. But watching me in those early interviews, defending my mom and seeing my uncomfortable little face, like when I'm being asked these like crazy questions or they're saying horrible things about my mother to my face while my mother's sitting next to me. And you look at this little girl just wanting to keep her mom alive. Like, it's hard. That was heartbreaking. Like, I even come out of the documentary going, how am I not in a straitjacket? Like, how have I gotten this, far? But you had to fight for it. And I think because it started so early for me, but there was so much, that I learned to fight early. I didn't find my voice until much, much later. Because when I went to university, when I got an education and I came out, people were mad that I had an education because I couldn't be walked all over in the same way. I wasn't manipulatable in the same way. And that was a shock to me because I thought, they're going to love this. And I was like, oh my God, I'm now getting crucified for that. Like, what? So there's if you start to show strength or growth or independence or confidence, you get attacked even more. And that, that was tough for me to learn. And when I saw the documentary, I was very moved by myself as a little girl, really trying to hang on and hold on and stick up for someone I loved so much, who I felt loved from. Didn't matter the alcoholism, the craziness, whatever. The baseline was love, and that went a long way.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's, you must miss her a lot.
I miss, the end was kind of brutal. Like, I don't miss that very riddled with dementia, fear in her eyes. Like that part, she was so distant. But I miss the laughing that we had together. And I laugh a great deal with my girls. So humor is what I have retained from her. And there are things that happen in my life and I kind of go, did you do this? I know you did this. Like, you did this, right? And you are laughing up there or maybe in the middle or maybe down. I don't know. She probably moves around a lot. She wanted to make sure she touched a lot of bases.
But going back to sort of when you're saying, how are you not in a straitjacket? I think humor is one of our biggest saviors in difficult times. It just is, it's a fork in the road, right?
Yeah.
You have like a horrible thing happen. It's like you can either go down this poor me, sad path, or you find the humor in the moment. And, I talked to Margaret Cho on the podcast, and she told this like horrifying and amazing story about wanting to take her own life. And that it was, I hope I'm going to get it right. And it was like she tried to, it's just like so graphic, but she tried to thinking about hanging herself and she couldn't. She was like, I'm too fucking fat to even kill myself. Like it's way too much. I'm going to have to like lose more weight in order to be able to do this, which is, I think if anybody who listens doesn't have gallows humor and doesn't understand, the thing in there, but it is, I think the laughter, I know that's what saved me so many times and my family.
I think it has to and it's not, yes, maybe it's a survival tactic or a defense mechanism, but if you step a little bit back, the ridiculousness of things. Like I remember being the only one in the room having to go view my mom's body, and she didn't have any relatives not that she spoke to, or they didn't, anyway, whatever. She had a sister who was still alive. But I'm in the room and I'm like looking at this weird thing that's lying out. And you're kind of like, oh, this is weird. And all of a sudden it occurs to me, oh my God, I don't remember picking out pants for her. I just picked out a shirt. And there were 2 shirts, both leopard print. She loved animal prints. She was in that phase of her life. And one was a really nice silk one, like by Dolce & Gabbana or something. And then the other one was like a shitty cotton one. And I started with the nice one. I was like, I'm going to bury you in something, or not bury, but cremate you in something really nice. And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm going to keep the silk one that's Dolce & Gabbana, and I'm going to put her in it's going to get burned anyway. I was like, oh. So then I realized I didn't pick out pants. And all of a sudden I was like, no, oh no. I look around, I'm like, no. And I was like, well, you gotta look, right? So I go and I lift open the blanket with the plastic or whatever. She's got no pants on. And I was like,
oh my God.
That might be the funniest, most horrific thing I've ever witnessed in my entire life. And I'll never get over it. But it was so funny when I recounted it in my mind. Like it was horror and hysterical at the same time.
Right. Oh my God. Gosh. That's amazing.
I'm glad Margaret didn't succeed.
Yeah, me too. I think we get reminded in so many different ways, especially in today's world. There's just so much suffering. And, and that thing of like, you never know what someone is like, what someone's actually going through, right? And the sort of faces we present. It's a lot. But I think too,
you brought it up though too, like not letting yourself be a victim, I think is, and bad stuff happens. Like bad stuff happens and people are mean and the world can be really harsh. But it's how you come through it and what you decide to categorize it as. You know, like the things that I've watched where people have become very comfortable with being a victim and that becomes their MO. They're not happy. Their lives are shorter. They go through life with this, acknowledge bad shit happens, and it does, and it's all relative, I mean, obviously there's stuff that's absolutely horrific in the world, and I can't necessarily identify with it, but it's bad. But you hear just in your own circle, you see those who are very comfortable being victims, and that to me is very dangerous and sad.
Yeah. I think it's a lot. It almost feels like the parallel of, when people talk about forgiveness, it's not about saying that the behavior that the other person engaged in is okay. That's not the dynamic. And I think the same too is that you can have been victimized and sort of be a victim, noun lowercase v, but to embody it as your identity.
Yeah.
That's where it's I wrote a piece actually a few years ago about it was called Who Gets to Live in Victimville. And was because it's really interesting to me. I mean, I think you'll probably be able to relate as a public person that it's a discussion. I mean, we see this whether even with people who aren't necessarily public, but stories are talked about. Other people are trying to decide whether or not you're a victim, trying to describe your behavior, like your experience.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to me. It's just a fascinating observation of society.
But it really revolves, it really kind of goes right back to them. It's all about that person, and I think, I have to be, if somebody is sort of nasty at me, it doesn't not hurt. But then I have to kind of go, okay, wait a minute, where is this coming from? It's coming from their need for something. It has nothing to do with me. But to have empathy rather than pity, pity is hard for me because I feel it and then I lose respect. And that's that's dangerous too. You know what I mean? I have to really rein my everything in and say okay, first of all, take yourself out of it. And that's hard to do. And then, where is that person coming from? And do I need that person's validation? Probably not, but I have to go through this series of, I have to talk myself through this series. Otherwise, I either get hurt or I get super angry and petty. And I can't live like that, So it's interesting.
Sort of going back to the documentary, because I think there were so many things that it touched on. One is I reference a lot, actually, which is that it was talking about, I can't recall now, I'm sorry if it was you who said this or someone else, but was pointing out about how with feminism that happened in the 60s of independence, of Roe v. Wade, women going back to work, that sort of triggered a shift in the collective, the collective gaze, going from our focus on women like Marilyn Monroe and Sophia Loren to saying, okay, these kinds of women are now going to want their independence, we will focus on the girls. And
that was a doctor. I wish I said that, but
okay.
It was one of the doctors that got a psychologist and sociologist. Anyway, very, very smart, very...
Yeah, it was so eye-opening to me because from my own experiences, I've always been interested in this period where, I think we started to see in the late 90s too and early aughts of these young women being scandalized, feasted on for the world, right? In different ways. And seeing what happened with you and how it was sort of some of this shift of the gaze to girls was really interesting to me.
Well, and also it's, one of the things, and I wrote my thesis about Louis Malle and about Pretty Baby and another film, La Commission, which is another movie he did about the loss of innocence. And the last shot of the film of Pretty Baby, Violet's character looks right down the lens. And it was breaking the fourth wall. There was a child running behind her, blurred. And it was at that moment that the gaze shifts and she becomes very empowered. And it's that character says, oh yeah, I'm the sexual being. And now I'm supposed to be a cute little girl with this new perfect life. And he said, he said, I want you to stare down the lens and it's going to be uncomfortable. And it's just, but he said, he didn't explain it to me then that way because I was only 11. But in looking at it later, the symbolism of it was amazing. And when what you're saying about the shift, now there's this movement for the, the cougar with the young guy. It's like the through line is sex, right? Sex sells. That's what is appealing. It's otherworldly. It is, the world needs it. But if there's a problem with it or people have a problem with it, then got to shift to something else. Then it was the young girls, and now it's the, oh, you can't. But then if she's with a younger man, that makes it cool. Like, it's just so interesting where we're going to be next, Yeah. I mean, my girls are, just body image wise, they celebrate their bodies in a way that I never could or would, and that's positive to me. They embrace their curves and their size and, they're not emaciated and they're not getting stuff done. But they look at themselves a lot and they spend time on their individual selves. And that I found really interesting watching that and remembering what I felt like when I was younger.
Right. I think there was, I think about myself, I was always into fashion, like even my mom loves to tell these stories of me, in kindergarten, and I refused to go to school until she cut my dress. And I had a very specific idea of how I wanted to look. But I think then once I became aware of body types and sort of, and body shapes, it then became about, what am I allowed to wear? What is okay to wear? Wow. And what I see, so it's interesting for me to look at the younger generations, and I catch myself at first going, I can't believe she's wearing that. Yeah. And then I'm trying to retrain myself to just, this is a person who's wearing something they feel good in. They're wearing something that they feel reflects who they are. And I can't even imagine the freedom of that, just because I just didn't grow up in that world, I
didn't either. I mean, I saw my daughters last week, and I did a performance at their school, and then they came out and they were going to a party, and I was just going to go back to the house. And my younger daughter, who's like 6'2", she came with this teeny dress and boots, and I was like, oh my God! I go, was that a belt? What is that? And she's like, Mom. And I was like, no. And I went, I mean, you look beautiful, but can we pull your dress down a little bit? Only, because you're watching your little baby girl.
Yeah.
And it's just like, but they take the time and they feel good about it. And and they're wearing these little mini dresses with cowboy boots. And you're just like, what is happening? But they're very empowered in one way generation.
Right. Well, and they're sort of, I think it's that period too, where you're trying on different identities still. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it is that, and it's so much harder with social media, I think, for young people to do that. But we still, but you're so funny. You've been so funny in our conversation, just witty and funny, and you love doing comedy, right? Mm. But you also do, obviously, musical theater because you did Cabaret and Grease, right?
Yep, Grease first, Cabaret, Chicago and the West End and New York, and then Addams Family. So,
okay.
Whenever they need a replacement, they usually call me.
Oh, come on. No,
it's true. It's true, and it's been wonderful because, they don't give you enough rehearsal time, but, a lot of these shows, if you originate a role, you've got to be doing it for a year, and you have to be doing it all over the country, and then just to get to Broadway. So I mean, learn a show in 9 days and get shot out of a cannon on Broadway, but survived it and was able to play Morticia and Roxy Hart and Rizzo. Wow. You know what I mean?
In 9 days, you learned the whole show in 9 days?
9 days.
What the oh my gosh.
It is. It's because they don't want to spend the money, and you do it in a room with tape.
Wow.
And a stage manager. You don't ever meet the director. But comedy, I can't live without it.
And then you're also performing. I was trying to think, I feel like I might have seen you. You were at the Carlisle, right?
I was at the Carlisle, yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe
like
Feinstein's, maybe like
maybe
even farther back.
Like maybe. But you were saying in your book, right, that there was that you almost didn't do your one woman show. Is that?
I had a seizure. I had a grand mal seizure 3 days before opening at the Carlisle. And I had flooded my system because I drank so much water that I flushed all the sodium out of my system and my system shut down.
Wow.
And I passed out in a restaurant. I don't remember. And next thing, I'm in an ambulance. And I luckily got better. They kept me there for a little while and then sent me home. And then I was able to, I had 2 rehearsal shows in Indianapolis, and I canceled those and rescheduled them, and then was able to open at the Carlisle. Yeah, it's expensive to do your own show. It's a lot of pressure. And you've got to really crave it. And I actually don't crave attention like that. Like I crave being in sitcoms, and I crave doing, dramedy and shows like Suddenly Susan or Lipstick Jungle, or the one I'm starting in September. When I was doing Mother of the Bride, which is the latest Netflix movie that I did, I love that kind of stuff. It's sort of, it's just entertainment. It's not heavy. But being on stage, just talking about myself and singing, not in a character, was just too hard. I've seen people and they come to life. And I know how to turn it on and, jazz hands my way through it. But I'm so relieved when it's over. And I love recording in the recording studio. Love that. And I mean, if I could get a good, tight show and travel and not have to only talk about depression, I probably would enjoy it, The interesting thing was, though, I went to Indianapolis after, and I was able to make fun of the whole story about what happened with my seizure. And I cut out 2 songs that I never really sang that well, to be honest. And one was a Dolly Parton song. Nobody wants to hear me sing a Dolly Parton song. You want Dolly Parton to sing it, or
Miley Cyrus.
Or Miley Cyrus, exactly. I'm not, and there's nothing I could have done with it that would have been impressive at all, if you think about it. But there was this running theme as to I wanted to sing country music when I was little. And I switched it out to Delta Dawn, which sits in a much better place in my voice. And I thought, that's interesting. If you can find a way to make this show have characters in them, that you then can sing the songs you want to sing that do sound good on your voice, that you don't feel like you're being compared. Pick obscure songs. No one's going to know, and they're not comparing you to the people who really do this for a living, So.
Can you tell us what you're doing in September?
Oh, yeah. It's called Allie and Andy. It's a mystery show, much like Matlock or Murder, She Wrote.
Okay.
And it plays with this sort of generation difference between my character and a young and up-and-coming podcaster of mysteries, and I'm a mystery writer. And that they're in a small town, and it's amazing how many murders there are in a small town that we have to solve. So it's that very light. They kind of call them blue sky mysteries because they're not overly gory or
Okay, I could watch then.
Yeah,
I can't do gore.
I can't do gore. Although I just started watching The Pit. And I close my eyes when it's the gory part, but there's not too much of it. It's such a good show. But no, I like the residents, not the resident, the resident.
The residents, right,
Shondaland. That's the kind of humor.
Okay,
it is with the murder.
And forgive me for not knowing, but have you written a film or TV show? Do you?
No, I think that if a show like this were to, it's only 6 episodes, I think. If if I were to get into another either sitcom or show, I think I would sooner direct.
Okay.
I'm much more of that person than I am, especially a writer of original thought. Once upon a time, that kind of a thing. Like I'm good at writing stuff that happened, but I don't, like, my husband comes up with scenarios for shows. Like I don't have that gene.
Yeah. Have you guys worked together?
We worked together in the way beginning, and it's so funny because, and we've worked subsequently in little ways, but I would love to be directed by him and say his words, because I think his words are really funny. And you wouldn't know that we were even together. Like people are like, we were worried that, because you guys were in a relationship, that it was going to be, that there was going to be conflict or something. And I just put on that different hat, and I just become the actress. And it's interesting. I didn't know that would be like that. I even worried about it. So we have no trouble, no fights, not.
Oh,
about
that's great.
About that.
in that lane.
Yes.
Right? In that lane. It's interesting because do you feel like there's this I'm thinking about, I think you said somewhere around, I think it was with Blue Lagoon maybe, or Endless Love, of sort of these moments of kind of dissociating, right? So like that separation. But this is a different kind of separation. This feels like a more professional, something you're choosing consciously rather than your body and mind reacting, right?
Because when I was younger, I needed to disassociate because it was not my, it wasn't my life, and I didn't want it to take over. Whereas with this, I love being an actress who gets directed, who gets guided. And I respect that relationship so much that I don't feel, there's nothing that I need to protect in myself the way I used to as a child.
Yeah. Is there, I mean, we all have moments, everybody, whether you've, been in a global scandal or been the youngest movie star, whatever the things are, like you think about, okay, what are those sliding doors, or what might let my life have looked like differently? Do you, like, what does that look like for you when you think about that?
I do think about that a lot. Well, I used to think about it a lot because I coveted what I thought was more credible within my art, my career, I wanted an Academy Award. I wanted to be one of those actresses that you see up there on the show, picking up her little gold man and saying it from the time I must have been 8 when my mother first got a plane ticket to California, and we got to watch the Academy Awards, but we were like in the nosebleeds.
Wow.
Like you couldn't see anybody on stage. They were teeny. So I grew up, and then after, like, I don't know what movie, I think it was Endless Love or something, my star kind of started to dull a bit. I was no longer the young thing. Well, I wasn't the young sexualized thing, right? I was and there was another crop of kids that came up, and everybody was like, "Oh, you're going to get the Academy Award for Pretty Baby," just like what's her name?
Jodie Foster. Jodie Foster
actually,
for Taxi? No.
No, Tatum O'Neal. But
right. Oh,
for
okay.
Jodie,
right.
Yeah. And so, and I love Jodie Foster. I mean, I've always loved her. And, but the comparison was, Tatum was 9 or something like that. And so I was under the impression, so when it didn't happen, and when roles started sort of drying up, and the quality of directors I was working with kind of was shifting, I thought it was purely my talent. And so I got super, super insecure about not being talented enough. And then I was still so famous and still talked about as pretty. So now I had fame and something that was still deemed valuable outside, but not working. And it just and then the reaction to that was, well, we still have to make money. So make a doll about you, go into the celebrity part and go do, a Nescafe commercial in Japan and, and do all these things that were just like, just not creative or good or quality or anything, but they were money and we needed money. So there was that era. And it took me so long to not feel shame about that. And yet, if I hadn't been designated such a huge name public figure, I don't think I'd have the longevity that I have and the opportunities that I have now. That I can, if I think about myself in third person, which I don't do a lot, but
right, Bob Dole,
right. Yeah, exactly. But I can greenlight a certain TV show, or I can get into a room and, for a congressperson or lobbyist or whatever, like in that room and get them to listen to me. I've found a way. And I think if I had just been the type of actress that I coveted and wanted to be seen as, and then I got older without having the accompaniment of those other elements, I don't know if I would have had a career that lasted this long. I definitely wouldn't have been able to afford the things that I can. Like I can live in a nice house and, and vacations and stuff like that. So if I hadn't gone down that trajectory, I might have just done great work and then aged out.
Yeah, it's really interesting. What I've never thought about before that's really interesting to me right now is that what you're talking about when you were after Endless Love, Endless Love.
It's a sequel.
Yeah. Was sort of an invisibility in the career at this young age. And then sort of that, like, it's so interesting and full circle to me that you're taking that on in the book you just wrote. It's invisibility at a different time in your life for different reasons. There's something interesting and sticky to me there.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way, but that's very true. And there was this invisibility in the things that I put value on, but then the pressure of being so recognizable.
Yeah.
For being recognizable, like for stuff that was so far in my past that I was like, I'm not 11 anymore. I'm not 15 anymore. Like and it's so hard to reconcile it. I mean, that's why I attribute a lot to theater because, they took me in and on, and I was stunt casting, and that was the first time it had ever really been done.
I don't know what that is. I'm sorry.
Put someone in a show that the headliner's leaving, right? Rosie O'Donnell was leaving. And get a famous person in there who's not known for being on Broadway, but who can sell tickets. And now that's all you see. And I mean, that's it. Like you can't, isn't one of the Jonas Brothers, I think, is doing a great piece. And like, you didn't see known musical people or known actresses or even forget models, but that was the first time, and it was the first time that I realized I was like, oh, the Brooke Shields piece of this, those two words together, that's why they've called you. Now, then I had to work my ass off to learn how to do all that and align myself with the best dancers and the best singers and, and just morph into that and work really hard. But I thought, God, there is value in that. And you've been fighting it for your whole life because you think there's no validity in your talent because you're famous. And then friends asked me, they were doing a whole Super Bowl episode, and they had all famous actresses in it. Like, it was like Julie Roberts and there was a lot of different people who were in it. And I was among them. And then I got my own television show based from that one episode.
Wow.
And
Suddenly Susan, right?
Yeah.
Is that Okay.
Yeah. And that was, that was my Lana Turner moment. But it was because the ratings were good and I contributed to the ratings, right? So then I started thinking, okay, how do I navigate this, still make money, but then somehow keep a show going or get good ratings? Because when I do a show, they have me do a gazillion press interviews. Right. Now, someone who's unknown, it comes in a show. They probably do a press interview with the company. But if you're a well-known person, they trot you out like you can imagine. And but I'm the one that gets the opportunity to do said show. So I've learned to not hate it or resent it. I've learned to sort of lean into it and see how I can not lose, how I can use it to my advantage. And so whether it's doing a straight play or, going out and pitching a show and, kind of harnessing that in this era of my life, I don't know if I would have had the ability to, if my life had gone the way I had wanted it to go.
So interesting. Yeah. The last question I ask everybody is, what is something that you're wanting to reclaim right now? And the answer could be anything, a part of your identity, an emotion, a place, a thing.
I want to reclaim my peace of mind that in all the noise and in everything, I lost a little bit of my, like, it's okay. It's okay. You know what? You're fine. You're a good person. You have good people in your life. Like, don't be so hard on yourself. Don't be so hard. And when I was much younger, I had this buoyancy to me. And there was a chunk of time that I got really, really serious. And I needed to be, because things were not great. Things were happening that were sad and health-wise and parents and loss and like a bunch of stuff. And my light kind of got a little dimmed because I got a bit beaten down. And then I was still famous. So then I was angry about being famous because I didn't have any freedom. So there was this like 10, 15 years of just angst. And I'm watching myself I'm getting bits of it back. And it feels so good that it's like, I feel like the Macy's Day Parade balloons when they're being like blown up and they're just going to soar over their life and be like, it's okay. You did well. Just have that peace of mind.
Yeah.
To
float.
Kind of to float. And feel full and feel light,
Yeah. That's really beautiful. That's really beautiful. Yeah. Oh, Brooke, thank you so much for this time.
Thank you so much.